He stood outside the tall glass building long before the doors opened. The morning air was cool, and he pulled his thin jacket tighter around his body. In one hand, he held a worn folder with his papers. In the other, he held a small backpack that belonged to his little child. He had dropped his child at a neighbor's place only a few minutes ago. The child had cried when he left, holding onto his leg and asking when he would be back. He promised he would return soon, even though he did not know how the day would end. This interview meant everything to him. He had lost his last job when the company shut down. Since then, he had been doing small jobs, fixing broken things, cleaning yards, and helping people move just to keep food on the table. Some days were good. Many days were not. Still, he never let his child see how worried he was. At night, after putting the child to sleep, he would sit on the old couch with a small lamp and read free lessons on his phone. Learning new skills and trying to improve himself, he believed that if he worked hard enough, something good would come. The building in front of him looked too fancy for someone like him. The glass shined in the early light. People in neat clothes walked in and out with coffee in their hands, talking about meetings and plans. He felt small as he stepped inside. His shoes were clean, but old. His shirt had been washed many times, and the collar was starting to look thin. He wished he could afford something better, but he used what he had. Inside, a guard pointed him toward a waiting area. There were other people there, sitting in nice chairs with their papers in neat folders. They talked quietly to each other, sharing stories about past jobs and big companies they had worked for. He sat in a corner, holding his folder close. No one talked to him. Some people glanced at him and then looked away. He could feel their eyes judging him. He did not blame them. He knew how he looked. Tired, worn, like someone who did not belong in a place like this. Still, he stayed calm. He had learned not to let other people's thoughts control him. His focus was on doing his best for his child as he waited. He noticed a strange noise coming from somewhere deeper in the building. It was a soft beeping sound, slow at first, then faster. No one else seemed to hear it or care. The people in the waiting room kept scrolling on their phones or talking about their lives. He listened closely. The sound reminded him of machines he had worked with in the past. He had once worked in a small repair shop where alarms like that meant something was not right. The sound stopped for a moment and then came back. Louder this time. He leaned forward in his chair. Something about it did not feel normal. Still, he stayed quiet. This was not his place to say anything. He was just here for an interview. A woman came out and called a name. One of the other people stood up and walked in. Then another name was called. More time passed. His name was not called yet. His hands started to sweat. He wiped them on his pants and took a deep breath. He thought about his child, waiting at the neighbor's house, playing with toys and asking when he would come back. That thought gave him strength. He opened his folder and looked at his papers again, even though he had already read them many times. They were simple. They did not show fancy schools or big companies. They showed years of hard work, small jobs, and skills learned the hard way. Fixing things, solving problems, working under pressure, taking care of others. Finally, his name was called. He stood up and walked toward the door. His legs felt heavy, but he kept going. Inside the room, a few people sat behind a long table. They looked serious. They glanced at his papers and then at him. Their eyes were not kind, but not cruel either. Just cold and distant. He sat down and answered their questions as best he could. He spoke clearly, even though his heart was beating fast. He told them about his work, about how he learned new skills on his own, about how he could handle problems without panic. They nodded, but he could tell they were not very interested. One of them kept checking the time. Another one barely looked up from the papers. He felt the rejection coming before they even said anything. He had felt it many times before. The slow loss of hope. The quiet way people decide you are not good enough. Still, he did not give up. He finished his answers and waited. One of the people behind the table gave a short smile and said they would let him know. That was the polite way of saying no. He thanked them and stood up. His chest felt tight as he walked back into the waiting area. He knew what would happen next. He would go home and try to explain to his child why nothing had changed as he walked toward the door. The strange beeping sound came back, louder and faster than before. This time, he saw a few workers in the hallway looking confused. Some were talking on their phones. Others were moving quickly, but without clear direction. The air felt tense. He stopped for a moment. His body reacted before his mind did. He had heard sounds like this before. It was not just a small problem. It was something serious. He could feel it. People rushed past him, not even noticing he was there. He looked around, trying to understand what was happening. A screen on the wall started flashing with warning signs. He could not read all of them, but he could tell it was not good. He thought about walking out. It was not his job. He had not even been hired. But then he thought about the people inside the company and how something like this could hurt many lives. And he thought about his child and the kind of example he wanted to set. So he did something simple. He followed the sound. He walked down the hallway toward where the noise was coming from. The beeping led him to a door that was half open. Inside was a small room filled with machines and screens. One of the screens was flashing red. A few workers stood there, looking stressed. They were talking fast, using words he did not understand. But their faces showed fear. He stayed at the door for a second, watching. The machines reminded him of the ones he had fixed years ago. Different, but not completely. He could see that something was not working right. A system was out of balance. No one noticed him at first. They were too busy trying to fix things their own way. He cleared his throat softly. Still, no one looked at him. The beeping grew louder. He stepped inside. That was the moment that would change everything. Even though he did not know it yet. The moment he stepped into the small control room, the tension in the air hit him like a wall. Machines were blinking red, alarms were screaming, and a group of employees huddled together, pointing at screens and speaking in a rush. Their voices were full of panic, full of fear. They looked around trying to find someone who could fix it, but no one seemed to know what to do. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him, but somehow, amidst the chaos, he stayed calm. He took a deep breath and scanned the screens carefully, noticing patterns that the others missed. It reminded him of nights at his old jobs, repairing machines that everyone else said were broken beyond repair. He remembered every instruction, every lesson, every small mistake he had made in the past that had taught him how to solve problems without panicking. One of the employees noticed him standing there and waved him over. "Do you know how to fix this?" she asked, her voice trembling. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked closer, carefully observing the blinking lights, the warning messages, and the system logs. "I think I do," he said finally. It wasn't a boast. It was a quiet confidence that came from experience. The others stared at him, not sure whether to trust someone who was still technically a candidate and had already been rejected in their minds. But desperation left them no choice. They stepped aside. He started checking the main console, pressing buttons, and entering commands slowly, making sure not to make a mistake. The alarms kept blaring, and sweat began to bead on his forehead. But he didn't rush. Every move had a purpose. He called out instructions to the workers around him, directing them to restart certain parts of the system, to check connections, to look for specific errors. Some followed, some hesitated, but he stayed patient. He explained calmly, using simple words that anyone could understand. There was no arrogance in his voice, only clarity. Minutes passed, and the room felt like it had stretched into hours. Every second mattered. One wrong move could ruin everything the company was trying to do. He noticed a problem that no one else had seen, a small error in the coding system that was causing the alarms to trigger. It was a minor issue in appearance, but it had major consequences. If it wasn't fixed immediately, the system would crash completely, and the company could lose millions. He pointed it out to the team, showing them exactly what needed to be done. Some of the workers still looked doubtful. They were experts in their own right, but stress had clouded their judgment. He stayed calm, repeating his instructions and breaking the process down into simple steps. He began working directly on the main system, typing commands carefully, rebooting servers, and running tests. His hands moved with precision, his eyes never leaving the screens. As the alarms continued to blare, he reminded himself to breathe. Panic would not help him. He thought about his child at home, about the promise he had made to never give up, about the nights he had spent learning and preparing for moments like this. He let that determination guide him. One of the employees spoke up, still unsure. "Are you sure this will work?" He looked at her and nodded. "Yes," he said simply. "Trust the process. We just need to follow the steps carefully." His calmness had a subtle effect. Slowly, the panic in the room began to ease. People started to focus, doing exactly what he instructed. Following his lead, he worked faster now, double-checking every connection, every line of code. His mind was fully engaged, every bit of knowledge he had gathered over the years coming together. He remembered fixing machines with limited resources, improvising, thinking creatively under pressure. That experience was now paying off. He noticed a small inconsistency in the wiring of the backup system. It was a tiny thing, easy to miss, but it explained why the alarms kept going off, even after other fixes had been attempted. He carefully corrected it, holding his breath for a moment. Then ran a full system check. The alarms began to slow down. The red lights stopped blinking so rapidly, and a sense of relief started to flow through the room. He didn't smile yet. There was still work to do. He ran a few more tests, ensuring the system was stable. Each confirmation brought a small weight off his shoulders. The employees who had doubted him now looked at him with a mixture of amazement and respect. One whispered almost to herself, "How did he know what to do?" He didn't answer. He focused on the task until every indicator on the screen turned green. Silence fell over the room. Then the manager arrived. Stern man who had been in the office moments before, unaware of the growing crisis. His eyes widened as he took in the scene. "What happened here?" he demanded. One of the workers explained quickly. "This man fixed the system. We were about to lose everything, and he solved it."
Oh.
The manager turned to him, disbelief clear in his eyes. "You did this?" he asked. He nodded quietly. "Yes, just a small error. Fixed it step by step." The manager's face shifted from doubt to admiration in seconds. He had been ready to reject the man only minutes before, and now here he was, the savior of a situation that could have cost the company dearly. The employees who had been panicking now gathered around, shaking his hand, patting his shoulder, expressing gratitude. It was a moment of recognition that he had never expected. No one cared about his worn clothes or tired eyes anymore. They saw skill, calmness, intelligence, and courage. He had acted without hesitation, without concern for status or reward. He had acted because it needed to be done. As the room settled, the manager called everyone to stand aside. He looked directly at him. "I need to know more about you," he said. "Tell me about your experience, your skills, and how you were able to solve this so quickly." For the first time in the day, he felt a sense of pride swelling inside him. He explained calmly, speaking of his previous jobs, his experience fixing machines, troubleshooting problems, and learning skills on his own. He told them about the nights spent working alone, the challenges of being a single parent, and the determination that had kept him moving forward despite constant struggles. The manager listened, nodding, asking questions now with genuine interest. He asked about past challenges, about how he stayed calm under pressure, about the ways he solved problems without resources. Each answer was met with more admiration. The employees who had been skeptical now saw someone they could trust. Someone dependable, someone extraordinary in the quietest way. Through it all, he remained humble. He did not boast, did not try to take more credit than he deserved. He simply explained, step by step, how he had approached the problem, why he had noticed the small errors others had missed, and how experience and patience had guided him. The manager and the employees could not hide their astonishment. Here was a man they had been ready to reject. And yet he had saved the day. By the time the situation was fully resolved, the tension in the office had disappeared. The alarms were silent, the machines were stable, and the employees were no longer panicked. The manager turned to him again, a new respect in his eyes. "You handled this better than anyone here," he said. "We underestimated you, and I want to correct that." He paused, looking around the room. You just proved something very important. Skills, courage, and intelligence are not always obvious at first glance. The single father nodded quietly, feeling a mix of relief, pride, and exhaustion. His body was tired from the long morning, but his mind was alert, energized by the knowledge that he had done something meaningful. He had faced a challenge no one expected him to handle, and had succeeded. For the first time in a long while, he felt a spark of hope that things might actually be changing. As the employees began returning to their regular work, some still shaking their heads in disbelief, he stepped back toward the manager. I came here for an interview, he said softly, almost embarrassed to remind them. The manager smiled, a kind of warm smile that made him feel seen for the first time in a long while. I know, the manager said, and what you did today just changed everything. We need someone like you on our team. It was a moment that no rejection could erase. In a single morning, a man who had been overlooked, dismissed, and underestimated had shown everyone that true skill and courage often come quietly. It's unseen until the moment they are needed the most. He had stepped into chaos, faced it without fear, and proved that sometimes the people we think are least likely to succeed are exactly the ones who can achieve the impossible. As he left the control room, his mind wandered for a moment to his child, waiting at home, unaware of the morning's events. He imagined the pride he would feel sharing this story, the joy of knowing that his hard work, persistence, and courage had finally been recognized. But more than anything, he thought about the lesson he had just learned himself. Never underestimate what a determined heart can do. Even when no one else notices, the office now looked different to him. Not because it had changed, but because he had changed. He had faced the moment that would define his future, and he had done it not for fame, not for recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. And that quiet strength, born from years of struggle and care for his child, was exactly what had saved the day. The manager walked beside him as they returned to the main office area. I want you to stay, the manager said. We have work that needs someone like you. We almost lost everything this morning, and you were the one who saved it. You've earned a place here if you want it. He looked down at his worn shoes, at his tired hands, at the folder he had brought in, thinking it might be useless. And for the first time that morning, a small smile formed on his face. He nodded. I want to stay, he said quietly. It was more than a job now. It was proof that his struggle, his persistence, and his quiet determination had meaning. That morning, he had not just fixed a system. He had shown what a single father, determined and focused, could do when the world seemed ready to reject him. The room seemed brighter now, not because of the sunlight, but because he felt seen, valued, and respected. And in that moment, he knew that life was about to change. Over the next few hours, he began to learn more about his role. He was given access to systems, introduced to teams, and invited to share his ideas for improving processes. His input was valued immediately because it was practical, thoughtful, and proven by what he had already accomplished. He felt a sense of belonging he had not experienced in a long time. It was not just the job or the recognition, it was the feeling that his experience, his struggle, and his hard work mattered in a way that changed the outcome of something significant. During lunch, he found himself alone for a moment, looking out the window at the city below. He thought about the morning, about how quickly everything had changed, and about the small child waiting at home. He imagined telling them about the day's events, the chaos, the fear, and finally, the calm he had brought. He smiled quietly, feeling a warmth that had little to do with pride and everything to do with hope. As he returned to work in the afternoon, he noticed subtle changes in the office culture. People were talking differently. There was more respect, more collaboration, and a sense of appreciation. They had seen what he could do under pressure. They had seen him act without hesitation, solve problems without panic, and inspire confidence in others. And in that, they had learned something valuable. Judgment based on appearances is rarely accurate, and true skill often shows itself in moments of crisis. By the end of the day, the manager called him back into the office. We need you on this team immediately, he said. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. Your work has already proven your value. We want you to start making a difference right away." He nodded, feeling a quiet determination. Today had been intense, exhausting, and filled with challenges, but it had also been transformative. He had walked into a place where he expected rejection, and instead found an opportunity to demonstrate the depth of his experience, the strength of his character, and the courage that had been built through years of struggle and perseverance. As he left the office that evening, he felt lighter than he had in years. He thought about going home, about seeing the small face of the child who depended on him, and about sharing the story of how an ordinary man, overlooked and underestimated, had turned a moment of chaos into a moment of triumph. And for the first time in a long while, he believed that life could be different, not just for him, but for the little person who had inspired him to never give up. He knew the journey was far from over. Challenges would continue, and moments of doubt would return. But today had proven something undeniable: determination, skill, and a steadfast heart could change outcomes in ways that no one could predict. And with that knowledge, he walked home with a quiet confidence that whatever came next, he could face it not just for himself, but for the one who mattered most in his life. The next morning, he arrived at the office earlier than usual. The city was just waking up, streets slowly filling with cars and people, the sounds of life carrying through the air. He adjusted his worn jacket and took a deep breath before entering the building. Today would be different. Yesterday had been extraordinary, but today was about proving consistency, about showing that what he had done once could be repeated, and that he was not a one-time solution, but a reliable presence. As he walked through the lobby, employees who had watched the previous day's events with disbelief now greeted him with small nods, quiet smiles, and subtle respect. The receptionist even gave him a warm, genuine good morning, something that had not happened the day before. It was a small gesture, but it made him feel noticed in a way that had been missing for years. For so long he had walked through life feeling invisible. Now, for the first time, he felt seen. He made his way to the control room again. The machines were quiet now, stable and functioning. He had already been briefed on improvements and maintenance that needed attention. His first task was to review the systems, check logs, and ensure that no hidden errors remained. He worked methodically, not rushing, carefully analyzing every detail. It was the same calm focus that had helped him solve the crisis yesterday. Even as colleagues stopped to watch, impressed that he could handle such responsibility, he remained patient and concentrated. Later, the manager came to speak with him. "I want you to meet the board of directors," the manager said. "They need to hear your story. What you did yesterday was extraordinary, and they need to understand how someone like you could have such an impact." He paused for a moment. Meeting the board felt intimidating. These were people with power, influence, and experience far beyond his own. But he reminded himself that yesterday had proven that he belonged here. He had skills, patience, and experience. He had solved a problem no one else could. And more importantly, he had a reason for pushing forward a child who depended on him, a life he was building. He nodded. "I'll do it," he said simply. The boardroom was large, filled with high-backed chairs and polished wood. The directors looked at him curiously, some skeptical, others intrigued. He stood at the front, feeling the weight of their eyes, but he did not let it shake him. He began by explaining the situation from yesterday, the small system error that had escalated into a major problem, the alarms, the panic, and the steps he had taken to resolve it. He spoke calmly, methodically, breaking down technical details into clear, understandable language. As he spoke, the directors listened intently. Their skepticism melted away with each word. They asked questions about how he had known what to do, how he had guided the employees, and how he had remained calm under pressure. He answered honestly, quietly, and with clarity. "Experience," he said, when asked about his knowledge. "I've faced challenges before that required thinking clearly, observing details, and staying calm. That's what helped me handle this situation." One director leaned forward, curiosity evident in her expression. "You've done all of this without formal training for this specific system. How did you acquire these skills? He smiled faintly, remembering the long nights of self-study and practical learning. Life teaches in its own ways, he said. I've learned to solve problems by trying, failing, and learning. I've worked on systems, machines, and projects without anyone guiding me. Those experiences taught me how to stay calm, analyze problems, and act effectively. By the end of his explanation, the atmosphere in the room had shifted. The directors, who had walked in skeptical now, viewed him with respect and admiration. Some exchanged glances, acknowledging silently that they had underestimated him. The story of the single father who had been ready to be rejected now stood as proof of resilience, intelligence, and courage. After the meeting, he was escorted back to his workstation. Employees and even managers stopped him in the hallway to thank him, shake his hand, and ask for advice. The respect he felt from them was profound. They had seen him act under pressure, solve a problem that could have cost the company millions, and guide a team without panic or hesitation. He realized something important. Recognition was not just about words or titles. It was about showing others what could be done when calmness, experience, and determination combined. During a quiet moment, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From the long nights alone, caring for a child, working small jobs, learning skills on his own, and facing countless moments of rejection, everything had led to this point. Every failure had prepared him to succeed when it mattered most. And in that reflection, he felt a deep sense of gratitude for both the struggles and the small victories along the way. The afternoon brought a different challenge. A system update had been scheduled, and some of the new software was not functioning as expected. Employees were unsure how to proceed, hesitant to make changes for fear of causing another problem. He was asked to assist. Without hesitation, he reviewed the update, analyzed the errors, and created a plan for implementation. He guided the team through each step, explaining clearly what needed to be done and why. The update was completed successfully, with no errors. And the team learned a valuable lesson in handling technical challenges with careful planning and calm execution. By the end of the day, he had earned more than just respect. He had earned trust. Colleagues who had once doubted him now came to him for guidance. Managers who had been ready to reject him now saw a leader in him. And he, a single father who had walked into an office expecting judgment, had found a place where his skills, experience, and determination were valued. As he prepared to leave for the day, the manager stopped him. "We want you to consider a permanent role here," the manager said. "Not just for what you did yesterday, but for what you've shown consistently today. Your calmness, skill, and clarity are exactly what we need on our team." He felt a mix of relief, pride, and humility. This was more than just a job offer. It was validation. It was proof that persistence, preparation, and quiet determination could overcome even the strongest doubts. He nodded, speaking simply. "I would be honored to stay." Walking out of the building, he thought about his child waiting at home. The small victories of the day were not just for him. They were for the little person who depended on him, who inspired him to push forward even when the path seemed impossible. He imagined telling them about the day, about how he had faced challenges, guided people, and earned respect not through words, but through actions. The city outside was alive with people rushing to their destinations. Unaware of the quiet triumph that had occurred in one of its buildings, he walked through the streets, feeling the weight of exhaustion, but also a deep sense of purpose. He had faced judgment, potential rejection, and fear, and had emerged stronger, respected, and more confident. He knew the road ahead would still have challenges, but he had learned that calmness, experience, and determination could overcome even the most unlikely obstacles. By the time he reached the small apartment, the sun was beginning to set. He entered quietly, careful not to wake his child, and set down his bag. For a few moments, he simply sat on the worn couch, reflecting on the day. He had been ready to be rejected, ready to face disappointment. Instead, he had done something incredible, proven his worth, and earned a place where his skills mattered. And in that quiet reflection, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The child stirred, rubbing sleepy eyes, and he smiled. "I'm home," he said softly. The small voice responded with excitement, asking about the day. He knelt down, gathering the child into his arms, and thought about how every choice he had made, every struggle he had endured, had led to this moment's security, respect, and the chance to build a future not just for himself, but for the little person who depended on him as they shared a simple dinner, laughter and stories filling the small apartment. He realized that the most extraordinary accomplishments often went unnoticed by the world at large. But for him, yesterday and today had proven that courage, patience, and skill could shine when it mattered most. And that knowledge, that quiet triumph, would guide him through every challenge yet to come. He knew life was far from perfect. There would be obstacles, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But he had faced the impossible and come out stronger. With respect, recognition, and the knowledge that he could rise to any challenge. And as he tucked his child into bed that night, he felt a profound sense of peace. The journey was just beginning, but he now knew that determination, skill, and love could overcome even the harshest judgments. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, and new opportunities to prove himself once again. But tonight, he could rest knowing that he had done something extraordinary, something that had changed the course of his life and the life of his child forever. And in that quiet confidence, he slept, ready to face whatever came next with the same courage, calm, and determination that had carried him through the most incredible day of his life. He woke early, before the sun had fully risen, with the sound of the city slowly coming to life outside his small apartment window. The quiet morning gave him a moment to reflect on everything that had happened over the past few days. Just a week ago, he had walked into a building expecting rejection, uncertainty, pressing down on him like a heavy weight. Now he had not only secured a place in a company that respected him, but he had also proven to himself, in a way that no one could deny, what he was capable of. After getting ready quickly, he packed his small bag with the essentials he would need for the day. Today was not just another day at work. Today, he felt, was the beginning of a life he had been striving for. The start of stability and hope he had been working toward for so long. He kissed his sleeping child gently on the forehead before stepping out into the fresh morning air, the promise of the day ahead filling him with a quiet excitement as he walked toward the office. He passed the familiar streets, the vendors opening their shops, the distant hum of cars beginning their morning rush. His mind wandered briefly to the journey that had brought him here, years of odd jobs, of struggling to make ends meet, of quiet nights studying and learning, and of a determination to never give up, no matter how difficult life became. All of it had led him to this point, this moment of possibility. Entering the office, he was greeted by smiles and nods from the staff. Even those who had barely acknowledged him before yesterday now approached with curiosity and respect. Some asked questions about the control room incident, wanting to know how he had stayed calm and found solutions when so many others had faltered. He answered patiently, explaining clearly but humbly, never boasting. Letting his actions speak for themselves, the manager met him as soon as he arrived. "We've been discussing your role here," the manager said, leading him to a small meeting room. "We want you to take on more responsibility. You've shown skill, patience, and leadership in a way that is rare. This is more than just the tasks you completed. It's about the example you set for the team." He listened carefully, absorbing every word. The offer was more than he had expected. It was not just about a job or financial security. It was recognition, respect, and an opportunity to grow into something more significant. He felt a sense of pride, not from ego, but from knowing that his hard work, persistence, and quiet determination had finally been noticed. The day passed quickly, filled with work, problem-solving, and learning. He guided teams, explained systems, and offered solutions with the calm clarity that had already become his hallmark. Each successful task reinforced his confidence. Employees began to approach him for advice, and managers asked him for insights on projects. Every interaction reminded him that he belonged here, that his efforts were valued, and that his presence could make a difference. During a short break, he stepped to the window overlooking the city. People moved below like tiny figures in a busy pattern, each occupied with their lives. He thought about his own life, about the child waiting for him at home, and about how much had changed in such a short time. He had faced judgment and potential rejection, acted with courage and skill, and emerged not just unscathed, but stronger, respected, and ready for more. Later, the manager returned with a more personal question. "I want to know what drives you," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Why do you push so hard, even when the world seems ready to reject you?" He paused, thinking of the small person at home who depended on him, whose laughter and curiosity had been his motivation through countless nights of struggle. "I have someone who relies on me," he said quietly. "Someone who gives me purpose every day. That's why I keep going, even when things are hard. I want to create a life that is stable, safe, and full of opportunities, not just for me, but for them." The manager nodded, understanding clear in his eyes. It's rare to see that kind of determination combined with skill and humility. "You've already changed the way we see leadership and problem-solving here." Word of his efforts spread quickly throughout the company. Employees who had been skeptical became eager to learn from him. Projects that had stalled due to uncertainty were completed successfully with his guidance. His calm and methodical approach began influencing the culture of the workplace, inspiring others to think clearly, act decisively, and work collaboratively. By midday, he was called to meet with a team that had been struggling to implement a new system. They were anxious and unsure of their abilities, afraid of making mistakes. He spent time patiently showing them step by step what needed to be done. He encouraged questions, explained reasoning, and even shared small tips he had learned through experience. The team gradually gained confidence, completing the task successfully. Watching their faces light up with understanding, he felt a deep satisfaction that went beyond professional achievement. He realized that helping others succeed was just as rewarding as solving any technical problem. As the afternoon moved on, the manager approached him again with news that surprised him. "We want to offer you a permanent leadership role," the manager said. "You've earned it, not just through yesterday's incident, but through the way you've approached every task since. We need someone with your experience, calmness, and determination, guiding the team and setting an example for others." He felt a mix of gratitude and humility. This was more than a promotion, it was validation of years of struggle, late nights, and persistent effort. He nodded slowly, accepting the offer with quiet confidence. "I appreciate it," he said. "I'll do my best to honor the trust you've placed in me." Returning to his workstation, he found a moment of quiet amidst the bustling office. He reviewed ongoing projects, organized his tasks, and made notes for improvements. He reflected on the journey that had brought him here, the long nights alone, the small jobs, the constant worry about providing for his child, and the countless times he had been underestimated. Everything had led to this point, where his skills and character were not only recognized but valued. As the workday came to an end, he prepared to leave, thinking about the small apartment where his child waited. The walk home through the city streets felt lighter than it ever had. The weight of uncertainty, the fear of rejection, the exhaustion of struggle had been replaced with a quiet sense of purpose and hope. He had faced challenges head-on. His actions had changed the course of his life. Entering the apartment, found his child playing quietly on the floor, eyes lighting up as he entered. The simple joy in that moment reminded him why every struggle had been worth it. He sat down, played, and shared stories of his day, careful to convey excitement and positivity without overwhelming with details of work. The child laughed and asked questions, and he answered, realizing how much hope and stability had been restored in their little world. Later, as they shared a simple dinner together, he reflected on the lessons of the past days. Life could be harsh and judgmental, but perseverance, calm thinking, and determination could overcome even the most difficult obstacles. He had walked into a room expecting rejection, faced moments of fear and uncertainty, and emerged stronger, respected, and ready to take responsibility for his future. After putting his child to bed, he sat quietly in the living room, reviewing plans for the coming weeks. Projects, training sessions, and team leadership responsibilities lay ahead, but he felt ready. He had proven to himself and to others that he could face challenges with skill, patience, and resilience. The quiet pride he felt was not about recognition, but about knowing that he could rise to the occasion when it mattered most. In the days that followed, continued to excel. Each challenge, from system updates to team training, was met with calm focus and practical problem-solving. The employees who had once doubted him now sought guidance and advice. Inspired by the way he handled pressure and led by example, his reputation within the company grew, and he began to feel a sense of belonging that had been absent for years. Through it all, never lost sight of why he worked so hard. Every decision, every effort, every late night at the office was for his child, for the chance to provide stability, security, and opportunity. He had learned that life could be unpredictable and unfair, but dedication, patience, and quiet determination could create paths where none seemed to exist. Weeks turned into months, and he became a cornerstone of the team. Projects succeeded under his guidance, and the culture of the office began to change. Calmness replaced panic, collaboration replaced hesitation, and confidence replaced doubt. He had not only earned a place for himself, but had influenced others to grow, to think clearly, and to act decisively in challenging situations. One evening, as he walked home after another successful day, he thought about how far he had come. The fear of rejection, the struggle to survive, and the uncertainty of the future had been replaced with purpose, respect, and hope. He had turned a moment of potential failure into an opportunity for triumph, and in doing so, he had changed the course of his life forever. When he entered the apartment, the child ran to him, excited to hear stories and share small victories from the day. He smiled, realizing that the most incredible achievements were not always the ones the world noticed, but the ones that created stability, hope, and love in the lives of those who mattered most. As he tucked his child into bed and looked around the small apartment, he understood something profound. Life's greatest challenges could bring out the greatest strengths. Courage, determination, and quiet skill could turn moments of judgment and doubt into moments of triumph. And for the first time in years, he felt a deep, lasting peace. Knowing that he had not only survived, but had succeeded, had been seen, and had created a future filled with possibility. Sitting quietly in the living room, reflecting on the journey from fear to recognition, from struggle to achievement, he realized that his life had changed in ways he had never imagined. He had walked into rejection and emerged with respect, responsibility, and hope. And as he prepared for the next day, he knew one thing with certainty: no matter the challenge, no matter the obstacle, he could face it with calm determination. And the quiet strength that had carried him through everything so far, this was more than a victory at work. It was a victory for his life, for his child, and for the belief that even the most overlooked person could do something extraordinary when given the chance. And with that thought, he finally allowed himself to rest, ready to embrace the future he had fought so hard to secure.